Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Going to give a few more minutes for everyone to get in, but hope everyone's having a good Wednesday. So, the topic we're going to be talking about today is migrating to the latest version of Java, which is Java 16. It's kind of continuing my live stream from last week. Going to keep working on that a bit. Again, kind of using the Spring Boot Petclinic app. But give a couple more minutes before people to join in, and we'll get going. But I think this will be an interesting conversation to keep on going because there's a lot of discussion on it. And I'm just going to send out a quick tweet here just to let people know that we're officially live. So yeah, moving to Java 16, it seems to kind of enter the or not just Java 16, but just kind of keeping up to date on the Java versions. It's kind of entered the zeitgeist of the Java ecosystem recently. Kind of focusing on a couple of tweets here from Marcy. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. But so this kind of at least what initially kicked off a bit of my interest in what we're going to be talking about today, specifically about using Spring Boot Petclinic, updating it to Java 16, and again, kind of focusing on records. We'll continue that conversation. Did a bit more research in the time on how it can specifically help with Petclinic, but on how records can help with that. So we'll look at that a bit. But then also Gunnar Morling was kind of talking about, I think there's like a lot of concern, like with a lot of Java developers where, maybe you're on Java 8 or just several versions behind, and now because of that, like there just becomes a greater and greater concern about the difficulty of updating, and if, organizations were maybe a bit more proactive, a bit more active in keeping stuff up to date, it becomes easier then to go to each new version. So if you actually did get onto the release train of the new versions of JDK, actually upgrading to each version, going from 15 to 16 and 16 to 17 and 17 to 18 and so on, isn't actually too bad. And also, yesterday or earlier this week at least, there was this really great article by Carl Mastrangelo. I'm sorry, I won't butcher your name, but a really great article about the difficulty of many organizations from moving beyond Java 8. And it's actually even really surprising that apparently he works at Netflix, and even Netflix was struggling to move beyond Java 8. So definitely, if you're at an organization that's still on Java 8 and you kind of just feel like you're way behind and like what the heck is going on here, you're not alone. Even really highly acclaimed organizations like Netflix are having a lot of difficulty in moving up, or at least there's a lot of that same fear when it comes to moving up. And I think a lot of that may become maybe because of concerns around Java 9, the introduction of the module system. There was a lot of FUD or fear, uncertainty, and doubt that was caused by that. I did a few presentations on Java 9 back when it was being released, and I don't know, maybe I was a bit of a cause of that as well when talking about the module system. But really, it isn't nearly the issue that it is for most organizations to move for most applications to say to move from 8 to 9 or 9 and above. It just created a lot of uncertainty because of the module system, because of maybe some concerns and some the difficulties around the module system at the time. Also, I'm guessing there's a couple of people in here, but my sound is coming through correct, right? Not just seeing. If someone wants to leave a comment, just to make sure that it's not like also too loud or too soft. But yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So first, a little bit of a repeat from the previous one, and something I'm also going to be talking, or something I'm going to have some content here in a little bit about, is I think one of the first things is that so here we have the Spring Boot Petclinic app, and we'll show a little bit more about it. But again, if you're not familiar, if you didn't see the last live stream, hopefully that should be big enough. But Spring Boot Petclinic app is a test application the Spring Boot team put together for demonstrating Spring Boot. It just again has pretty minor logic, but just a little bit of a test application that you can kind of work with. And let's see. So currently on 16, let me actually go ahead and change it back to Java 8. So the Spring Boot Petclinic app, this was originally, it's written in Java 8. If we go in here into the code and into the POM file, we can see that the version that it was written for is Java 8. So we're going ahead and then maven clean package. So the people here, are you beyond Java 8 at your organization, or are you still on Java 8, or maybe even before Java 8? Give this, it takes about a minute to build. I should have skipped the test because of, at least they're not too relevant for what we're dealing with. At this point, it'll probably just be quicker for them to complete than restarting it without the test. Just about done. Alright, so it completed. So of course then we can just simply start running this with the Java jar Spring Boot Clinic, or kicking off the jar that was built by the Maven process. And it's not quite started yet. And so we can see then the application just starts up and runs just fine. So maybe most Java developers know, but I think it's something that maybe most developers perhaps don't realize, is that you can actually, so like I said, if you're just joining, I just built this Spring Boot Petclinic app using Java 8. But you can actually just take this existing Java jar, this Java binary. So now we are running with Java 16, and without recompiling or anything, we can actually go ahead and run this application. Oops. So that's like one of the really nice things. Is if there is no other underlying source incompatibilities or something like that, you can actually just take an existing binary and then run it in the newest version. It just so happens that this runs for the Spring Boot Petclinic may not always be realistic for most real-world applications to go from directly 8 to 16 without having to at least make a few library changes that we may have come from underlying changes to libraries. That is something that is very nice, that you don't actually have to recompile. If you built something, if you were actually kind of like Gunnar Morling was suggesting, like if your organization is really good about keeping on the latest version, if you did just build some stuff in Java 15, you're not going to have to rebuild and redeploy it or rebuild it to run on Java 16. It should just run. You don't have to rebuild Java binaries just to run on a newer version. And with that, you still actually get a lot of the benefits of updating versions. So like it took about 12 seconds or 12 and a half seconds to start up and run the application. And that's good to see, Michael, that your rock and roll are running on Java 16. At least before becoming a developer advocate, like every organization I was with was on Java 8, and moving up seemed to be a very difficult process, kind of like what Carl was talking about in his article here, where people just kind of got into their idea of moving to Java 11 was impossible. But it isn't as that difficult as we think. But yeah, so that was back in 2018 when I moved from being an actual developer to a developer advocate. But to get back to my previous point, so about 12 seconds, she started up with Java 16, and we quickly just shot back to 1.8. It should take longer. Now this takes longer than normal because I'm streaming and I'm doing it all from my laptop, so usually without running OBS and everything, it takes about half the amount of time. But we should still see a pretty significant difference between these two, or maybe a small difference. But so like I said, this took about 12 seconds with Java 16. I'm suspecting it'll probably take about 13 to 14 seconds with Java 8. Yeah, a lot of the times it is just, oh, okay, so yeah, we see about 15 seconds. And I wish I topped it, but, and it was unusually high, but at least from the last time, there was about a haggle about the memory usage between Java 8 to going to Java 16. That seemed a bit on the high side, and actually that's probably going to be one of the things we're going to be focusing also on in this here in just a few moments, is doing some performance testing, just because, so at least just the at-rest memory usage, if I remember from last time, for Java 8 was like 700 some odd megabytes, and for Java 16, for the Petclinic app, it was about 350 or so, or 300, and that seems a bit high for the memory footprint savings when I kind of asking other people on the Hotspot and Java platform team. But you should still see a pretty significant savings all the same, just maybe not necessarily a full halving. And that's because just every release, the Java team, the JVM team, they continue to perform or make enhancements to the underlying hotspot, JVM, and that can come in things like, probably one of the biggest things was back in Java 9, they did what's called string compactation, and I can bring that up here real quick. And actually another one that they did, I should also okay, that was actually Java 8, never mind. Well, it still is a bit relevant. So, two big changes that were made that have pretty substantial memory savings is compact strings. So most of the strings strings often make up a very large portion of the heap space for most Java applications. And it was also found that, I think it's by default, UTF-8 is what is being used to encode the strings, which is using 2 bytes of memory to store each character. But the vast majority of strings, they are entirely using ASCII characters, which can all be stored within 1 byte. So pretty much what was happening is if like every character within a string, if it was all ASCII characters, instead of storing it and encoding it as UTF-8, it would be stored as ASCII, which allows, and again, as I said, 1 byte to be used to store each character, which can have a pretty substantial memory savings when, again, you know, a very large percentage of the heap space is devoted to storing strings. I think somewhere within here, this is JEP 254, explains like about this size of the heap space that is also being used. Another one, though this is actually backported to Java 8, though only if you're using the G1 parallel or the G1 garbage collector, which by default in Java 8 it's parallel. It will also do string deduplication. So again, that was another thing where, there you go, this is where I was thinking of. So roughly 25% of the heap space is devoted to string objects, so that's like, so about a quarter of it. And there can be a lot of times where you do just are using the same string over and over again, and pretty much instead of each of those having their own memory reference points, they will all just be used for the same memory reference point, which again can have a pretty substantial memory savings when you're kind of talking from a base of about 25%. So that's a couple of big changes. So in Java 8, the default garbage collector was parallel. You can get this string deduplication by changing a garbage collector to use G1, but then Java 9 and later, G1 became the default garbage collector, and so that can also add to it. So when I'm running these two different examples of using Java 8 and Java 16, that is one difference that you're not really seeing in the command line between them, is a difference in garbage collectors. Hopefully, let's see, grep, history, what was it for looking back through history for your commands? I did find a command that I was using for a while for to pull for Java instances running. It was tough. It's a little bit easier to control. Control R. Yeah, that's probably it. Oh, is it history and then grep and then top? I think that's. Boy, I didn't actually close. Yeah, I mean, Control Alt probably also works. Sorry to. Wait, what am I doing? I just remember having used this before, and that would also help as well, or at least that was a way I was able to find something I was looking for. And that's also going to be the. Dang, I think I unfortunately. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Michael. All right. So yeah, that's what I was wanting to do. No topic commands are running. So that one did work. Sort of like one was working before. Oh, that's also what's doing it. One moment. No, do not. That was almost a disaster. Almost closed OBS. All right. There we go. So I had multiple Java processes running, and that's why it wasn't working. So yeah, Java 8 again, using about 650 meg at rest of memory, and we quickly just go ahead and change it back to Java 16. Start it, and it was about 300, the difference. So. And again, just to demonstrate, so we both saw how the application started up faster. It was a few seconds faster, you know, so it was about 16 seconds last time with Java 8, and now it's 13 seconds with Java 16, and the other time it's about 12 seconds. You know, maybe about 10 to 15% faster for your startup time. It doesn't seem too unreasonable. Like I said, kind of this was what I'm mentioning, it's about half the memory usage, which again is a bit high, and I wouldn't really expect that if you're going from Java 8 to Java 16 to see this significant of a memory savings, but it would be pretty significant. I would say at least, you know, probably a quarter or so is what you should see. And again, this is, you know, without updating any of the underlying dependencies, without changing any of the code, we're kind of getting all of those benefits. It's not like, oh, to get all this stuff, you have to, you know, replicate code, update it to use like all the new APIs, update all your libraries. It's a pretty simple change. And there's also a lot of other benefits as well. For example, let's see, we could actually maybe even test this out. So let me start this up real quick. And so what I am going to do is deliberately induce a null pointer exception. So string, because I want to show something as well. It's like going to complain that didn't type it correctly. Class is empty, and it doesn't really matter what, but toString. Or actually, we'll do, well, this is good enough for now. Yes. That's actually not the first time someone's brought that up. My fiance, her sister, one of her sisters, also actually mentioned that as well, I believe. And then when I looked it up, I'm like, oh man, that is freakishly too close to my looks. So yeah, that that's not the first time I've heard that. All right. Oops. So back to 1.8. Maybe actually not. Package the skip test is true. Yeah, I mean, I don't see it as a bad thing. Looking like the character from Becoming Human. So But it definitely was pretty funny. Why is that giving me a null pointer? Or not a null pointer, why is it giving me an error? Oh, that's right, forgot. There's a bunch of validations that they do in here, which is really annoying for at least these purposes. Screen moves out of formats. Alright, hopefully that resolves those issues. Ooh, yeah, that's being compared to Woody Allen. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, that's not a great comparison for a whole host of reasons. What was the error it was giving? Type of formats. Where is it in here? Comment it out. Oh, there we go. Probably why. Those are off now. I know I could probably just turn it off with maybe command line arguments, but I don't know them offhand for Java format, and well, it doesn't matter too much for this either. So what I'm trying to show here, though, is there's not just necessarily performance advantages from going from Java 8 to Java 16, or to, or just in general upgrading your runtime, but there can also be other new tools and features you can take advantage of as well. So I'm going to actually demonstrate one here. So now that's built. I actually haven't done this before, but I'm hopefully this actually works. Okay, yep, exactly. So we got a null pointer exception here when we tried to start it. Now, which is exactly what we were expecting, because I deliberately put that in there just a few minutes ago. But now if I update to 16, and of course, null pointer exceptions, in this example, along with, deliberately putting it in there, it would be extremely obvious what's causing this, just because, it's just a single value, or this single variable that I'm trying to reference, which obviously this would be causing the NPE. My ego to accent, that's funny. But a lot of times it may not be quite obvious. I mean, we certainly have had that time where you had some sort of holding variable or value, and then you're maybe referencing some nested value within it, maybe even nested value below, and it can just be extremely difficult to find out that NPE. Then you have to make an update to actually step through it or debug it or whatever. So now if we run this in Java 16, now we can see, instead of just right up here, this null pointer exception happening and not getting any information about it, it actually tells us the specific variable name causes NPE, string to string, all that's happening. And again, while in this example it's extremely obvious and you wouldn't really necessarily need it, broadly speaking for NPEs, this is a huge benefit, because whenever those types of null pointer exceptions happen, it often ends up having to be a case where you have to go in, make a change, to add some additional logging into it, and then change it, and then finally actually fix what's maybe actually causing the null pointer exception. So by actually getting these much better error exception stack traces, that makes it a lot easier. Maybe. That is above my pay grade when it comes to future stuff like that, though. I am really excited about some of the changes coming. Pattern matching is definitely one of those top things. Let's see, our Java. There was actually a really great discussion recently on our Java about that. Pattern. Let's see, let's do for top of this week. I'm not sure what it is offhand, but I remember there's some topic. It may have been in reference also to oh yeah, on the Inside Java podcast, we published an episode. That's right. I think that maybe is what kicked it off. Yeah, the Inside Java podcast here. Really great episode. David Delabasi interviewed Gavin Bierman about pattern matching for Switch, and then for also just where pattern matching is heading in the future of Java. It's, I think, a really exciting thing. One of the biggest complaints about Java is its verbosity, and pattern matching is definitely going to help with that. And also, I think one really great thing is when you actually also look within the JEPs for pattern matching, which you can view all JEPs here at JEP 0. When Brian or whoever is proposing a new JEP for a new pattern matching, verbosity, isn't just maybe like, oh, I had to do a bunch of extra typing to get something to happen, but it's also a real opportunity where bugs can creep in, like the first one with instance of there. Let's go to the final one just because I know it's definitely there. So the existing, like, or before Java 16, how instance of would work is like you would do the test and then like you would set the value here, but maybe you make some sort of change and you forget to set the value or something else. Like there can be some opportunities where errors happen here or bugs to be introduced. Certainly I know I've definitely done this where I did the check to see if something's a string and then set it and then maybe forgetting to set it or setting it correctly or something and introducing a bug. And now, like this instance of, like it all does it in a single line with instance of string and then set it to that value within it. It just reduces the possibility of errors within the system. So that's really nice. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely positives within it. It's not definitely all bad. Like, having to explicitly define the types of something, unlike, JavaScript, which has dynamic typing, that can be definitely nice. Like static typing, it's a bit more verbose, but then it becomes much more clear what exactly that value is. You're not going to necessarily have to hunt down and through it. But there can definitely be some areas where maybe that's gone too far, or just, where it can be improved upon, and I think that's doing a lot of it with this pattern matching updates. Yeah, it's definitely not a one-way street, and of course also one of the great things, because backward compatibility is so highly prized within Java, is if you don't really want to kind of take advantage, or if you don't really want to do some of these pattern matching things just for whatever reason, there could definitely be some good reasons. You're not necessarily forced to. It's not like you have to now, instance of, for now and ever, it's going to be following this new pattern matching syntax. This will still remain valid Java, for well into the future. Same with switch expressions. They're going to be introducing pattern matching, or actually not to switch expressions, but to switches. They're going to be introducing pattern matching to it as well. That was added as a preview feature for Java 17. So yeah, you know, you can even handle null, or like you can switch on type. You can handle null. You know, that can be applied to both switch statements and switch cases, or switch expressions, but you're not being forced to do that. So, you know, that's always nice that you have this backward compatibility within Java. And that's just something that the Java team values, because the install base of Java is enormous. And so we have to be careful about making any breaking changes, because that would then affect a lot of people. Actually, that is definitely a comment that was on the this is to break backward compatibility, that did come up, where Ron Presler discussed that, like, you know, that's easy to say in abstract, but in actuality, that's actually not something you really want to be doing. All right, so back to updating to actual Java 16. So, ironically, it would be actually kind of nice if the Petclinic app didn't actually run within Java 16, but unfortunately it does, without any changes. But we can still kind of, again, go back a little bit through and update some other stuff to Java 16. Let's see, it's actually 2.5.1, I believe, is the most recent. That's all updated. So one of the things I did research a little bit since my last live stream is some other areas where this could be improved on. So yeah, so a few areas is, I think, here in Vet Controller, where there can be a few updates to how some of this works. It's not necessarily huge changes, but can be helpful. Yeah, so this is using new lists, array lists. So obviously, you know, it's more or less the same, but now natively, whereas they were using new array list from the assert J, instead of having to depend upon a third-party library to do that, you can just do simply list of. And actually, I think I know why that's not working, because you actually have to provide a list. List. Oops. Like that. Probably shouldn't actually need to do that. That's just. Keto was expecting convert. Alright, maybe I should have tested that one out first. Oh, I'm really well. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. I don't think too many people are in there. Does that sound better? Sorry if you had adjusted your volume to adjust for my sound. Now it's going to go up all of a sudden. Good now? Okay, cool. All right, I'll stick to this stuff then for now, and change some stuff in the future. Yeah, one of my goals is eventually to kind of completely change up my how I do my streaming. So, like, no problem, Nikolai. but I mean, this is actually good stuff. You know, if people are having a hard time hearing me or something, that's not good. But right now, as you can maybe kind of guess from what Nikolai was saying, is I'm running my live stream through my laptop, and unfortunately, it's a MacBook, and it's just not able to keep up with it. It sounds like it's about to take off right now. Planning on here maybe a month or so sometime. It's completely rechanged my rig to use my desktop, which is vastly more powerful since I actually just kind of set it all up and it's for gaming and everything. And that should actually help a lot. But first, I kind of want to make sure if I actually do like this live streaming stuff and kind of just get used to all that. Again, some great advice from Nikolai is rather than, you know, maybe I'm getting like all this equipment at one time and try to get it all set up, and then you just kind of get completely overwhelmed from like trying to do all this stuff at once, and you're just like, I'm just not going to do it. I decided to start doing streaming, kind of like I decided to start doing my Sips of Java, if you see me on Twitter, and then just to kind of iterate from there. So I know sometimes it's a little bit rough, but I will continue to kind of iterate it on it over time to hopefully get a little bit better. All right, so back to the code. So this was I thought an area. I thought it should just be able to change this to list, but we'll return. It's expecting a collection of bits. So a list should work because a list is a subtype of a collection. So, that's all I needed to do. What was the import? So, obviously, you know, it's not significant. You're getting it functionally the same with what it was before, depending upon the assert J library just to create a list. But now you can just do that directly with the core Java libraries, which, you know, again, a small benefit. Like so often, one of the things we talk about, or one of the things like Brian Getz talks about, is the last mover advantage. Instead of maybe Java aggressively going out there and incorporating new concepts into the core framework, they can kind of see what happens maybe with third-party libraries or other languages on the JVM, or even other languages out there. Like Kotlin is probably the one most people would think of, but even Groovy and, you know, again, other languages that aren't on the JVM, and kind of see some concepts they do. And if they're popular and they're useful, you know, that might then eventually get incorporated into Java. And, you know, they have some time from experiencing with those other languages and other frameworks to see how popular and how well it's used to maybe either improve upon it or just otherwise bring it into the core framework. Obviously, you know, this is pretty small with just the convenience factory methods added to like all the collections, but yeah, it's something. So that's one area. Pet type formatter text. But, you know, it's just some small areas where, you know, maybe you can see some improvements here. I need to take some time to get at least pretty familiar with it, but maybe one area I might look at eventually doing is for Spring IO and all their stuff. So what they use here, or at least on some of their site, is a project called Sagan. So the code that's kind of running all this is Sagan here. And I believe it is just written in Java 8. The Sagan site, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's written in 1.8. So like one area that this could be a bit more interesting to upgrade to 16, or any, you know, post Java 11, or maybe even Java 17, something we could look at also. Because there's going to be a lot more logic and a lot more potential areas where we can take advantage of the new APIs and new concepts introduced in more recent versions of Java. But unfortunately, I'm not going to do that right now because I'm just not familiar enough with it. And while I'm fine with, figuring some stuff out here live, I don't want to have that be the entire of the live stream. Pet controller test, let's see. So, yeah, I was looking through some of the code, and there was a few areas also, I think, yeah, pet type formatter. I think there was something in here. Yeah, so this can maybe be a bit more of a straight example of how the list of the new convenience factoring methods, and these were added in Java 9, so really it's not that new. Even if you're in Java 11 and something, you'd be able to take advantage of these. But hopefully that should just do common. This is not super much cleaner, but you're not. There we go. Actually, that's also what we don't need. Yeah, instead of having to do like this pet types.add, you can just do a simple list of, and then the items within here. It's a bit of a crazy syntax since they're actually initializing are creating new classes here, but programming a class switch language is even more of a pain in the butt. So that was a couple of little areas where some of the new syntax could be helpful. So one of the other, hopefully that's still, yeah. So it looks like some of the areas where he was, I believe that's, again, I'm sorry, I'm butchering his name. It's all the worst because I've met him a couple of times at Spring I/O in Barcelona, so I feel even way worse. So it looks like he's using, I think, projections in a few areas to take advantage of records. So like there's this owner details, and now it's using a record here, and I don't think owner details, I'm pretty sure, is never something that's actually persisted to the database. Because, as we kind of saw last time, JPA isn't something that can be really, isn't really a great candidate for being records, because a lot of times that stuff needs to be mutable, and I think as it stands, a lot of JPA libraries and frameworks, I don't know if they quite support it yet. I guess we could check to see, just to yeah, that's, so maybe it can sort of be used, but but I'm not sure. And eventually, one thing, and maybe I won't quite get it to today, is I need to set up some performance tests for this. I'm probably going to be using Gatling for that, where we can then actually run performance tests to both, maybe see what it looks like with using records versus not using records, and then also maybe get a better comparison between running with Java 8 and Java 16. Just because just having the things running at rest may not always be a great comparison. For hopefully for most of us, our applications are actually being, properly used in production. All right, so owner details. So that isn't something. Let me take a look at some of the work that he did. So yeah, like this is again, you know, he's setting up some DTOs using records. So we may take a look a bit at that. Let's actually put that into the correct location. And we'll just kind of copy these fields in. And again, that's one of the, so a thing with records is that they are supposed to be transparent carriers of data. So pretty much when you want to look at the definition of a record, just from looking at it, you want to be able to see all the different fields that are going to be within that record. You don't want to have to go looking for anywhere else to understand that record. And so part of that then is you can't extend, you can't have an extend within a record. That's not allowed because then it's no longer a transport data carrier. Now it's depending upon logic and behavior within person, and you know that could cause problems with actually mandating, making sure like all the fields are there, they're immutable, and all those things. So records, I think they're definitely a great addition. They do have some specific restrictions on them, which but I think those restrictions are also good for being able to better accomplish their goal of being, again, transport data carriers. So base entity and ID, I don't think that should be necessary because we're not going to be, well, actually we probably should go ahead and put the ID in here. That could be being used on the front end side to maybe order stuff perhaps. But that might not actually be used at all. So let's add all. This could be another area where, oops, not records, but record. So also though is that records, they're shallowly immutable. So what this means is like you won't be able to change the reference to vets once it's actually set within the record, but within this list you can maybe add or remove elements within it. Records isn't going to prevent you from doing that, so it's shallowly immutable in that way. And also here, this is like another thing, is all these values again are set at constructor time with records. So here, like us setting vets within it, again, this is not allowed because then it's no longer a transparent data carrier. Now there's like logic going on how this value might be set. It's not being set through the constructor. So if vets is null, new. So probably what we'll do is, let's see, I'm thinking, Yeah, this might not quite work. So like also by default is that the Java compiler will create its own canonical constructor for vets or for any record, but you can also override it with your own as well. Let's see, though, albeit that is kind of interesting. That might be a bug within Eclipse because this should actually already be added within it, where even if we didn't define this within it, that should still technically be added in by the compiler, if I remember correctly. Oh, we're talking about Cloudwood still. I haven't used it, so I don't really know. So then this dot vets is equal to that. Otherwise, so like this is how we could get the vet list. All right, so that's how we could maybe get that functional equivalence. So like what we could do here, as you can kind of see, we can have like a test with when it's being set up to like, okay, if this is being passed into null, then we'll just add it as an empty list. Otherwise, we'll just take in maybe whatever list you set it to. So let's actually now go into the vet controller. Do vets. Guess, yeah, we can just pass in a null there. And actually, instead of getting this get vet list, we will just actually, no, okay, this vets, there we go. So this would also, this accessor would also automatically be generated by the compiler, but we'll add this for the XML element just so that that annotation can work there. Because I'm not sure, we could put the XML element here, but I'm not sure if that would also be applied to the construct or to this accessor on it. I know it would be applied to the field, but I don't know offhand. So I'm just gonna do this for right now. I haven't programmed in Brainfuck. I've seen it, but yeah, I'm haven't really actually worked with it yet. No. New vets. Yeah, this is maybe a little bit of a weird way of going about it, but it should hopefully actually work this time. So we're passing in null, and this is null, then we'll just, initialize it with an empty array list. And let's see. All right, well, this should actually hopefully work. And I'm going to do a clean package because I don't think I haven't rebuilt it since Java 8, so definitely want to clear out all that other existing stuff just in case that may be an issue. I know Andres is probably very upset with me for right now. Did I not put in the right? Well, too late now. I thought I did skip test, but maybe I mistyped it and it just didn't recognize the JVM Argons now is doing the test. Yeah, I guess I must I must mistyped it. Whoops. Oh well. Should be finished here in just a few more moments. Oh, of course. Oh, okay, our test fail. Skips test now. Yeah, skip test. All right, I'll go ahead. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. Run this again, and we'll actually take a look. So, vet controller test. Show test results. Let's find all. Let's see. Yeah, I know. Nikolai also ribbed me a bit about that. I probably really should check out IntelliJ. I think it definitely does have like some better presentation mode than Eclipse does. So what is it complaining? Huh. Not sure. Vets.list versus vets list. Why is that complaining? No. Okay, so that built. Let's see if it actually broke the application. Or if this may be the test. This is just looking for something wrong. Man, getting ripped on here. Yeah. So initially the reason why, like I did use like IntelliJ just a little bit at one point, but I got super frustrated just because I'm so really used to all the hotkeys within Eclipse, and when those hotkeys weren't working with IntelliJ, like I'm just like, forget it. I'll just go back to Eclipse just because, not to say Eclipse is perfect, but you know, I got good enough with it that it was never really too much of an issue. But yeah, I still get used to IntelliJ, and also to the issue I had, I do know there's like a plugin or something that allows you, that translates Eclipse hotkeys to be able to work with IntelliJ, or maybe there's just a setting within IntelliJ where those same hotkeys work. Okay, so the failed test was, I guess, in fact, telling us something, which I guess makes sense. So it cannot be found. Okay, I know what the problem is. So it does, okay, get vet list. Yes. Okay, that's what's going on. So time leaf is expecting, yeah, it's based upon the time leaf Java notation, and so it's expecting this to be here, get vet list. So we'll just add that back in there. Man, you're brutal, man. Yeah. I mean, it's brutal but true. Okay, so that should fix that though. So yeah, time leaf
it looks for the objects and it's looking for a get, and then just removing that and just changing it to vet list. But obviously by just using vets, then it couldn't find it. So I'll have to also look up to see if time leaf has been updated for record notation. But for now, we'll just keep that in there. So that's also another thing with records is you can still have custom or extra methods in there for kind of this backwards compatibility as well. All right. Oops. Let's do Maven clean, and this time. Well, first, let's see if that actually, I guess, resolves that test failure. What's that whirring noise? Alright, so that looks like that should fix it. And so, while obviously we're not using the records here to connect into the database, just using it as a DTO, there does seem to be a lot of them, but just using it as a DTO here and kind of following Matei's lead is that the deserialization and serialization and marshalling and non-marshalling that's going on with like Jackson that's being sent over as JSON from the server up to the browser that's then being taken about and on that side, that should happen a lot faster because instead of like Jackson or whatever JSON or whatever tool having to do reflection to populate or depopulate those fields, it can just use a canonical constructor and then just use the accessors because again, that record is a transparent data carrier, so it can always just look at the publicly accessible constructor or accessors to know all the fields within it, and that should make it run a lot faster because reflection is, well known to be not very performant. So that could still be a benefit, even if you're not going from the database all the way to display using records. That would still be a benefit to updating even just like the view layer to use records. A man applies to be home check, and they ask him for references. For example, the go before. That's a good one. Let's see. Does it work now? There we go. So yeah, now that works. And yeah, this will definitely be a good area. And that will probably be part of the next stream, but we'll continue making some updates. But where I'm going to work on putting together a Gatling, or I'm going to get familiar with Gatling before, just to make sure, I'm not just spending my entirety of time just trying to, do basic research, but get at least somewhat familiar with it. And then we'll be putting together a Gatling test script where we can then actually compare the performance between using records and then not using records for some of these areas for like just the translation to the view layer. But for now, we'll continue making these updates because obviously I can just always go back to the initial Spring Boot Petclinic app when doing that comparison. Will Spring auto services that can be loaded via the service? I'm not sure quite what you mean by that. Do you want to expand upon that a little bit? Let's see. So let's find all. That's right, and that's also something we're gonna need to update then. Yeah, also, I guess we can see, is it actually also TR body? Yeah, it doesn't look like we're using any of the IDs in here. So if I have an interface and I have an auto-wired field with that interface as the type, will Spring try to load surfaces? I mean, I think it should. Well, you know, in the actual well, let's see. So if you try to implement that type, so annotations aren't translated from base classes into their subtypes. So you would actually have to implement that for like an interface, I believe, on that field. Or, you know, that extended class, you would also have to add that. I believe that's right. I could be wrong there. All right. So another thing I think I'm going to try updating here is specialties. Or yeah, had that TDO actually translate some of this stuff. Generally, I have to define a beam method and use servers loader there to. Man, I always kind of thought about myself as a Spring expert, but I haven't been heavily programming in Spring for so long that I don't know if I can really define a beam method and use service loader there to load in your service and return with it. And so, what would you want to then do instead, or well, I'll continue working on that. You can continue typing out your question. Maybe I'll be able to give a good answer to it. But maybe I'm just not. It'd be great if you could do it automatically. Already that field, the interface is the type. Yeah, I'm not quite sure if I'm following that. Yeah, that might be better. I'm not quite following. So, like, I do know, like, as far as automatic auto wiring, starting in Spring Boot 2. Or 5.1 or 5.2 or something like that, where, for example, here, Spring will automatically try to auto wire the single constructor within a class and do the type matching there. So that's kind of like some of that automatic auto wiring that Spring will do without you necessarily having to, you know, put at auto wire here on the field. And also just maybe as a general rule is you don't really want to do auto wiring directly on the fields just because then to kind of test with it's like class, now you would have to have like Spring or some sort of dependency injector, or I guess maybe even reflection, to actually fulfill or to supply a value for this field. Whereas if you hit the constructor, then it's a much easier to like pass in a mock or whatever you need to like test this class. And then it's also becomes a bit more difficult, like if their type isn't available, you know, a null happens or error happens. Generally, you want to do auto wiring through constructors for any field that's required to be part of that class. If there's like a field that might not be needed, you should use a setter to where, you know, something like this, void set vet repository. And sorry if I'm repeating stuff you already know, but maybe for anyone else who's watching this or someone who might be watching this later, you could also do it something like this, and required. Well, so like I mean, obviously it doesn't make sense for here, but if that repository wasn't required, but it's something that could be auto-wired, you could do it through the setter and, you know, actually set up the setter here to do that. But generally that's what you should do. You should really rely upon constructor injection, like it's being done here and throughout this project, no doubt, instead of field injection. I know early on when I started working with Spring, I did a lot of that, and you would just it just opens you up to a lot of potential issues. All right, so that's that find all. All right, I think I'm going to create a simple service class here. And so what I'm going to do here is, so I'm just going to copy and paste and just update this. I didn't realize that until just now, but clearly someone was just kind of copying and pasting this around. I don't know, maybe I did that. And they never updated that. Or, yeah, I must have did that maybe instead, but that's funny if that was actually already there. You know, it was never updated. And so we're going to do public. It's going to return a list of vet DTO instead, and this is simply going to be defined all, and then vets dot find all. So pretty much what we're going to do is we're going to take all the values that are coming out of this and then put it into the record class that we just created, and then return that instead of the vet, the normal vet class. So find all. We're gonna do a stream, and let's see okay, that's gonna return. I don't want to do that. I'll do it in the boring old imperative style for right now. Just because I definitely know I can. That's not gonna be right. Yeah. So let's change this to vet repo. There we go. All right, let's take a look at your gist here to get an idea of what you were talking about. Clearly, I wasn't understanding it. So let me pull it up here. All right, so you have a controller, base controller, question service. Auto-wired. Then you have a public interface within this controller. So you're running return an instance of parsing service. You're going class. Yeah. I mean, I see what you're doing here. I don't know of a good alternative, and I'm just also failure imagination on my part of just trying to understand the use case. Not, I mean, I'm sure there is. I'm sure you just didn't do it just because you're incredibly bored. But yeah, I'm not quite sure on what a good use case for this would be. So I'm just trying to then, because of that, I'm trying to have a difficulty then on offering maybe a different idea on how to accomplish this. I'll have to be this is something I'll also maybe take a look at here, or maybe ping some of my other spring friends or something to see if they have an idea on something around this. I'll have to check that out. Thanks for providing the gist. And like I said, I'll check with some people to see if there is something else there. So, all right. So I'm getting back the vets from the repository, and I'm going to then put all of them as records and then return that record list instead. So let's see. So for that's oops. So for each of these, and I'll just call it vet records. All right, vet.add. Oops. New vet DTL, and then vet.getID, vet.get first name, vet.get. And then, oops, not get.get, vet.get specialties. Yeah, that is a list. What's a set though? Okay, you know what? Let's just make that a collection instead. And that works. And now we'll return that records. All right, and now we're going to change this to use the service instead. Oh, vet service, not vet service. All right. Oh yeah, of course. And we'll also need to update this to take the record type now. All right, let's see if this all should hopefully work. Actually making some progress this time instead of last time of actually updating this to use records. I think also one of the things we'll look at as well is also next time, and maybe we'll take a little bit of look at here towards the end of the stream of using JFR as well, or JDK flat recorder. No, that's all right, no problem. Not a problem at all. The stream, I start with an idea on something, but I think that's part of the beauty of the live stream. We can kind of take it whichever way we can. It's whatever people seem to be interested in. So not a problem at all. Definitely keep the questions and stuff coming. I'm happy to try to answer them. Sometimes I won't always be able to, though. All right, so we're starting it up. Hopefully everything works. All right, so at least it started up. That's the first accomplishment. Ah, that didn't work. What error is it giving me? That number of specialties. Okay, so okay, here we go. So what we need to do there is, once again, add like another additional method to this. And simply all we need to do is that, and that should work. Probably really should be using Spring dev mode for this instead of having to rebuild and redeploy every time. But I'll do that next time. It's been a while since I last used that. And should just be started. All right, start it up once again. Let's see if it actually works this time. Cool. So there we go. We're making progress. So now this is actually loading at DTOs, or not DTOs, with the record class we created. And because of the low load and all that stuff, it's really hard to notice any measurable difference in everything. But that, again, that's something we'll definitely check on for next week when we do some performance testing on us, to see if there is like some noticeable performance improvement. And based on that tweet, hopefully there should be, based on this, it looks like records do make a difference. And I'm guessing performance, or maybe there could be some other areas where we could see some improvements as well. Let's go ahead and, well, something similar. We'll do it again with owners. We'll create an owner DTO and follow a similar path with what we just did with vets. So we'll copy this. So I'll keep that here just a second to kind of show again, maybe a little bit of something with records you can do. Set pets. And we'll just, again, do that as a collection. Broaden out that type a little bit. Oh wait, I'm going to owner. So that is all the fields. From that. And we'll actually then put the ID as the first one. Oh, yeah, we can't have private on here as well. So what I wanted to also show then with that is source and constructed fields. Given the way this is actually being handled, where it's directly coming from the database, it probably really shouldn't be too much of an issue. But a little bit of what I was showing is you can create your own constructor, and you can be like, if you do have like some of these requirements where like, okay, first name or last name can't be empty. If so, first name is, so we'll delete this here in just a moment, but just to show some of the stuff you could do if you wanted. Okay. So like this first name, you check, is it empty or is it blank? And if it is, then you could be like throw new illegal argument exception, and you can just be like first name cannot be blank. So that way, if you did need some sort of validation with how your records are being constructed, you can also do that. So again, you know, by default, records will create their own canonical constructor, but you can also create your own if, for example, there are certain requirements for some of the fields that they can't be blank, or you know, they can't be beyond a certain size like we have here for telephone. You could do that if necessary. So for now, I'll go ahead and just remove this, since the way this is being populated is directly from the database, and you know, we'll just kind of trust that the database, all the data in there, you know, not always a safe assumption, but we'll just assume for the case of this that all the data coming back out of the database is proper, so we don't really need to have any checking on it. But that is something that you definitely could do as well. So on a controller, so let's create a new class owner service, just like we did for the vet service, and toss service on here. Source, create a structure with the fields. Cool. We'll also update that. Okay, yeah, I definitely don't think I changed that. So yeah, you can definitely see there is some copying and pasting going on in here by whoever is last working on this. That's funny. Find by last name. Start creating these methods for it. Find by ID. Alright, that resolves all the compilation errors. And if you're just joining back in now, so what I am working on is updating some classes are updating the Spring Boot Petclinic app to use records wherever possible. And most of that is going to be happening between the view layer. And so we're changing it to where instead of sending this JPA owner object all the way to the view layer, we're going to change it to use owners. And next week, we'll look at actually, maybe getting a better idea on specifically what kind of performance difference that is. There should be one just because of owners or records have a canonical constructor. So JPA, or not JPA, Jackson, JSON, whatever kind of marshalling, demarshalling service you're using, they can use that for construction and serialization of the object instead of having to do reflection, which should, have a noticeable performance increase to it. There's also a lot of other reasons you may want to avoid using serialization. Some really great articles about that as well. If you're not familiar, like I remember when I was at IBM, one of my colleagues, Steve Poole, so why we hate, did a really great presentation on some of the issues that come with serialization. Like a lot of real big, scary potential security issues. And I'm guessing this will probably be touched upon, as well as a lot of the other issues that kind of come with serialization. But like one of them is with serialization, you can get around maybe constraints and stuff of how constructors want to be set up, or that could be imposed by constructors on how an object is built, which, could cause a lot of potential issues. So I'm sure this touches on that and a bunch of other issues. So that's something that's really good to know. And Records does a lot to address a lot of the issues around serialization. So there can be a lot of really great reasons, again, not just performance related, not just issues around less verbosity and all that, as to why you might want to consider using Records. Definitely do think it's going to be like one of the biggest things since Lambdas we're going to see, though. Thought we added all of those. Oh, that's why it's complaining, because I changed the type on it then. Init form. Okay. Guess we'll just do owner DTO. Yeah, that's why it's complaining. That will just be ID instead. I'll have to think about that, how when I handle just that empty object. Last name. And again, if you're kind of wondering why it's changing from get last name to last name, get last name, or they getter setter. That's part of the what's called the Java beans pattern, and that's not really a core Java specification. So when when records are added, they're just using strict accessors that represent the actual field names. So instead of adding that, they get stuff to it, the get instead. And also, obviously, since records are mutable, you wouldn't even have a setter anyways. All right, so owner.setID. Yeah, this is going to be a little bit more of a work here, getting this one updated than the one with vet, but we'll continue working through it. All right, so if owner okay, so that's probably something we're going to need to do within the actual service. To update this. So, oh, my laptop. See, my stream is slowing down. Sorry for the breakups in there. It looks like my laptop is struggling. Here, I guess maybe we can stop that for now and free up a little bit of space. I don't know. Let's see. Let's close some stuff. Maybe it'll be a little bit more stable. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. I don't know. Hopefully, closing some of these tabs will free up just a little bit space, memory, and resources. Is there anything else? Do that. Yeah, sorry, it looks like my stream is struggling a bit right now. Could just be maybe data network. All right. Maybe it's a little bit better now. All right, so we'll continue on these last few minutes. Update owner. Maybe owner DTO. Yeah, that's what's going to be actually coming back. That's what we want to have coming back at least. Maybe closing a lot of these tabs will also help a little bit. Again, one of the reasons I am looking to update and completely change my live streaming rig, but a little bit in the future. me also turn down. Still a bit of a noob on this, so I do have like my own stream up here for me, and I'm going to turn down the quality on that, and maybe that will help a little bit as well. Or I guess I can actually just pause it, since I think that's still allow this chat log to be provided. Reality, if you want to maybe just type something in there, that will let me know that it's still actually working. But I'll continue working on this. I guess if it's